operations against IS and cut its vital supply routes. Ben Bland, BBC News.
Well, let's speak to Tony Badran, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. He joins us from New York now. We heard in that report there Syria's President Bashar al-Assad claiming this is a victory, also saying it shows what he's doing is far more effective than what the Americans are doing. When it comes to his positions in terms of the negotiations for a political solution, where does this leave President Assad?
Well, I mean, the president's boast is simultaneously accurate, but also false, because it's not really his achievement. The reason why this happened is because of Russian air power on the one hand, and Iranian personnel and Iranian-led militias on the other hand, including Afghan militias, Iraqi militias, Lebanese Hezbollah, and so on, along with sort of a supporting cast of Assad's forces. This happened because the Russians had managed to impose the cessation of hostilities, which is a partial cessation, which means that the opposition can no longer mount offensive combat operations against the regime, which allowed it to mass enough and mobilize enough troops to be able to make that offensive against Palmyra. Now, in terms of his political position, clearly the Russians also, it's not his, the Russians want to achieve, and they've partially achieved this, they want to, first of all, legitimize themselves as a partner against in the war on terrorism and ISIS and so on, and by extension also legitimize Assad as a partner and force this partnership and cooperation on the US and the coalition, so that their operation, which are now nearing eastern Syria, will coincide with those of the US, forcing the US to deal with Assad.
So you say it's not his victory, it's Russia's, but essentially, you know, they want him to stay in place, don't they? And that does end up being a victory for him, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. I said it was both. It is both because it does benefit him. It's just not his own doing. It's the Russians' doing, despite all the claim of a withdrawal and so on. It's clear that their objective is to, first of all, secure his position, which they did in the first year of their operation, and then to move from that to re-legitimize him and to make sure that he stays for the long term. And if you hear, following John Kerry, Secretary of State John Kerry's trip to Russia this past week, the Russians immediately let out that the Americans have now agreed that there will be no discussion of Assad's future at this stage, meaning they're boasting of their achievement, that militarily that they had secured the regime, and now it's time for the political rehabilitation of the regime.
Okay, Tony Badran, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Lots to say, but we have to leave it there. Thank you. Let's take a look at a couple of other stories now. And reports in Yemen say that